Go to the donor, go to the donor.
Let's get there.
Let it play out. Go to me after the legal. Go to me after the legal.
All right. So welcome. We are going to get started. It is 7:02. I am Patty McCoy. I really appreciate everybody that is here or tuned in to the fantastic radio station.
88 won the tar, and the Plymouth Canton Community Schools are pleased to present live coverage of the regular meetings of the Board
Very
of
distracting.
Board of Education meeting in person this evening for the first time since virtual meetings began.
So I'm going to ask my board members to introduce themselves. We will start here on my left with Mr. Lazarowitz.
Hi, I'm John Lazards. Thank you for coming out tonight.
Good evening. My name's Doug Brooks. Thanks for coming out.
Good evening, Patrick Kehoe. Thanks for being here.
Good evening. I'm Kate Borninski. Thanks for everyone who came out tonight, and thanks for those listening to us at home.
And we have Anupam is on Zoom. She can introduce herself.
Good evening, this is Anupam Chuksidhu. Good to see everyone virtually. I'm sorry, I'm still under quarantine until I get my test results, but glad to be joining you remotely.
And Leonardo Savage is not joining us. He has been having some health issues that prevent his attendance. Ms. Merritt, would you like to introduce yourself and your staff, please?
Yes, good evening and welcome, Monica Merritt. And I'd like to begin by introducing all of our staff members here today, beginning with Ms. Diane Robertson, my assistant, who is so kind and thorough in her taking of the minutes for people that are not able to be here and as a record of our board meetings. Also like to introduce Mr. Nick Brandon. Mr. Brandon is our Executive Director of Communications and Marketing. We have our Chief Finance and Operations Officer, Ms. Debbie Piez, over here. We also have our Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources, Dr. Liz Vartanian-Gibbs. Our Executive Director of Student Services, Mr. Kurt Tiskowitz. And our PCEA Union President, Ms. Heather Fitzpatrick. So thank you for everyone for being here this evening.
Okay, we will rise and we will say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we are now on to letter A, adoption of agenda, approval of consent agenda. I am looking for a motion for action item 211022.
Madam President, I move that we adopt the agenda and approve the consent agenda, action item 2110-22.
Second.
It has been moved by Member Berninski and seconded by Member Brooks that we adopt the agenda and approve the consent agenda. Action item 211022. Would you like to take us through it, please?
Yes, President McCoy. This evening, our consent agenda consists of human resources transactions since our last time together. We have new hires for your consideration, as well as resignations and retirements. Also this evening, we have tenure recommendations, and we're pleased for our staff that has met the requirements to receive tenure. We have the approval of minutes from our regular meeting on October the 13th, 2020, as well as the final reading of policies 0167.7, that's the use of social media, policy 2430, district-sponsored clubs and activities, And that's it for your consideration.
Okay, so since we have a newcomer on Zoom. Mr. Brooks, can you take us through a roll call vote, please?
Sure. First member, Berninski.
Yes.
Member Brooks, yes. Member Kehoe.
Yes.
Member Lazarowitz.
Yes.
Member McCoyne.
Yes?
Member Sadoo.
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0.
Thank you very much. Dr. Vartanian Gibbs.
Good evening. I would like to be able to take a moment to introduce these awesome new hires that we have in our district. We are very fortunate for all of the new teachers we've been able to hire in the last couple of weeks. So when I call your name, if you could stand up, and then we will know who you are. So Nicole Olivado. Nicole is our new math teacher at East Middle School. She comes to us with a bachelor's degree from Madonna College, a math from University of Michigan, and 16 years of experience. Welcome, Nicole. Christina Chambers. Christina is going to be teaching a kindergarten class at Smith Elementary School. She comes to us with a bachelor's degree and a master's degree from Eastern Michigan University, as well as 10 years of teaching experience. Welcome, Christina. Irene Covington. Irene, welcome, is one of our new school nurses. She's been working with us for a while as a substitute nurse, but we have hired her as a permanent employee. She comes to us with her nursing degree from University of Michigan, as well as years and years of experience from Beaumont Hospital and as a patient educator. Next, I would like to introduce Amanda Fisher. Amanda is a new elementary teacher at Hoban School. 6 years of experience with a bachelor's degree in Michigan State University, as well as a master's degree from Oakland University. Welcome. Michael Ginsky. Michael, welcome. He is our new 4th grade teacher at Field Elementary School. He comes to us with a bachelor's degree from University of Michigan, and he selected our district for his first teaching job. So congratulations and welcome, Michael. Mackenzie Joy. Another school nurse, welcome. She comes to us with her nursing degree, her bachelor's degree from Wayne State University. Welcome. Lisa Kazicki. Lisa is a new school nurse also. She comes to us with her bachelor's degree from Hope College and 21 years of experience from St. Mary's Hospital. Gabrielle Nestor. Gabrielle will be teaching 4th grade at Workman School. She comes to us with 2 years of experience and a bachelor's degree from Palm Beach Atlantic University. Cheryl Wiseman. Cheryl is another school nurse, and she's coming to us with 23 years of experience from St. Joe's and Beaumont Hospital, as well as a bachelor's degree from Mount Carmel College of Nursing. Congratulations, welcome to all of our new teachers and school nurses. We are thrilled to have you and thank you for selecting our school district. Next, I would like to thank Sean Rowley, our Director of School Safety and Security, for his service in our district. Sean has helped us navigate a pandemic and has led us in the right direction for safety protocols, how to handle all the situations related to COVID, as well as leading school safety and security in our district. He has decided to move forward in a different capacity at this time, but we thank him for his work, as well as everything he did with the re-entry committee. So congratulations, Sean, as you move forward in another direction, and I know we will see you around the community. As Sean leaves, we welcome interim Josh Meyer. Well, he's around the building making sure everything's okay. So Josh comes to us with years of experience in, as a paramedic, a firefighter, the fire, and the Director of Public Safety in Canton, Michigan. So welcome, Josh, in your interim position of Director of School Safety and Security. It's sort of neat that we're at Discovery Middle School right now because we are saying thank you to Vicki Masiak, who has taught 32 years in our district, and she currently is a math teacher at Discovery Middle School, and she is retiring on December 31st. Also, thank you to Karen Thompson, who teaches 5th grade at Farron School. She's retiring November 30th after 19 years of teaching. 2 teachers are receiving tenure this evening. They've completed 5 successful years of work in our district, and so that means they are now a tenured teacher. First one is Stephen Barnes, who's a math teacher at West Middle School, and here's what Clint Smiley has shared about Stephen Barnes. West Middle School recommends Stephen Barnes for tenure without hesitation and with great joy. Steve Barnes is a vital member of the West community. He provides exceptional math instruction to students, going above and beyond with his interventions in parent communications. His calm, confident, and humble presence is refreshing and effective for teaching middle schoolers. Steve Barnes is a wonderful addition to the P-CCS family, and we are grateful he calls West his home. Congratulations, Steve. You deserve it. Sincerely, Mr. Smiley and Mrs. Konzicki. So congratulations, Steve, on receiving tenure in our district. Next, Savika Vodajewski is receiving tenure here in our district. She is a school counselor at Salem High School. And here's what Kim Villarosa, principal of Salem High School, wrote about Savika. Savika has been an amazing addition to the Salem High School counseling staff. Her work ethic and support for students is exceptional. Savika is constantly thinking of ways in which we can improve our support to students and families and sharing them with administration. She is a valued team member at Salem High School as well as the entire PSEP counseling team. Savika offers to jump in and help with any situation possible, regardless of how large or small the task. I recommend Savika for tenure without reservation. So congratulations to Steve and Savika for receiving tenure this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and welcome to our new employees, and we wish our employees who are retiring all the best. It's very exciting to have new school nurses, and I really appreciate how the administration has made that happen for us. We are now on B, which is celebrating success. And tonight it is Doug Brooks will be presenting the award.
Great, thanks. Let's see. Celebrating success this evening will honor Randy Rice and Matt Adis, 2 members of the P-CCS maintenance and grounds team, who both are important members of the Tanger Center team. During the past few months, and like many other members of our grounds team, Randy and Matt have certainly gone the extra mile to prepare our learning and work environment for P-CCS staff. They have helped in various ways to make sure that Tanger Center is a great home for our curriculum and instruction, community education, and technology team members. Dr. Deidre Brady, who nominated Randy and Matt for this honor, would like to share a few words about their contributions during this time.
Good evening, everyone. It's nice to see everybody. So one of the privileges I have is overseeing Tanger Center, where Member Brooks mentioned that my team, the curriculum instruction team, is there, in addition to some special education staff. And we don't have students in the building, so and it's a rather small staff, so we don't have a need for a full-time plant engineer at our building, but we do need support sometimes. There's a lot of things that we need moved to buildings. A lot of materials need to be shipped everywhere, and there's just sometimes things that we need done. And Randy and his partner Matt, they're amazing. They just stop to check on us. They're often delivering materials to field or to other schools that are by us, and they'll stop by to make sure that we're doing okay, we have everything we need. When there are times when we need materials, for example, when elementary science was implemented, We literally had our hallways completely full with materials that needed to be picked up. And if I showed up to move those things, I would be completely overwhelmed. And Matt and Randy are never overwhelmed. They are kind, they are respectful, they are helpful. They never once complain. They have the best attitudes of really almost anyone I work with in the district, to be honest with you. They are positive, supportive, helpful, and they never bat an eye at anything that I ask for, which sometimes I ask for strange things like, you know, hey, this desk needs moved, yeah, and they just come and do it for me. So I am privileged that they come and help me, and I'll just share a real quick story. Matt couldn't be with us this evening, but this summer, when we weren't in school with students, is probably like April, I was in the building by myself after doing food service one Wednesday, and in walks Matt. I said, what are you doing here? He said, I'm just checking. You know, we come and check just to make sure everything is okay. So I am very thankful. They go above and beyond. You know, they're some of our grounds crew here in the district. Their job isn't to come check on Tanger all the time, but they make sure to do it because they know that we need a little bit of support now and then. And I greatly appreciate everything that they do. It's not unnoticed. I appreciate you.
Thank you, Dr. Brady. On behalf of the Board of Education, I present both Randy Rice and Matt Adis with the Mary Beth Carroll Extra Mile Award. Matt could not join us tonight, but we are honored to have Randy here tonight to accept for him as well. Randy, would you like to say a few words?
Yeah, just like to thank the Board of Education for your support of grounds and maintenance for this award. And I also like to thank Dr. Brady for taking the time just to say something good. We're not trying to go out of our way. We just want to be kind and respectful. And it's an easy thing to do, and you guys make it easy for us to do. We know you're on an island, and sometimes you need a little bit more help, and we're glad to do it. So thank you.
Thank you. I so appreciate you. I know you know that.
Yes.
We normally would shake hands with you and congratulations, but we'll practice physical distancing and congratulate you from afar in our seats. Thank you for all that you do for our district.
Thank you.
All right, we are now to letter C, which is board committee reports and action. First up is the president's report. So I wanted to take this time to make sure our community knows that October was Michigan Library Appreciation Month. As most of you know, all of our buildings have a media specialist who do a plethora of activities, and they deliver instruction, they promote reading, they provide digital citizenship lessons, they support the staff and students, they curate and provide access to ebook collections, which has really been important during the pandemic. And so we really do appreciate our media specialists and all that they do for us. And I really appreciate the board members who have been very, very cooperative, and we had to reschedule a meeting. Everybody showed up. Everybody is prepared. I really appreciate this. And I would also like to thank the administration for all their hard work. I know that we have a lot of questions. We are very demanding, and I do appreciate it, and I thank you for your work. And all of the teachers out there who I know are swamped with trying to provide for all of our students. We really do appreciate everything they do for us. We are now on to committee reports. First up is Student Performance and Achievement Committee with Ms. Bornitzky.
Thank you, President McCoyne. The Student Performance and Achievement Committee has not met since our last regular board meeting, but we do have a meeting coming up Wednesday, November 4th at 4 p.m., so that's next week. I'm looking forward to it. Ms. Rail and I are going to be discussing the agenda in the next couple of days, and it is sure to be a very interesting meeting, as they always are. I would be remiss if I didn't leave a personal note for Vicki Maciag, just wanted to congratulate her on her retirement coming up, because all 3 of my children had her here at Discovery. So I appreciate her as a teacher, and hope she has a great future as a retiree.
Next up is the Policy Committee, and that is my committee. We met tonight just before the meeting, and we had a jam-packed agenda, and we had to table several items because we did not get through it. But not to worry, we have another meeting coming up. It's actually going to be November 10th at 5:30. So normally we meet the second Tuesday, the second board meeting of the month, but we have moved it up to the first. We have some policies that we want to make sure we are moving before the end of the year. So we are going to move to November 10th. Anybody is welcome to attend. We always have a lively discussion, and that is it. The next one is Finance and Operations with Mr. Kehoe.
Thank you. We met, actually last night. We had to reschedule our meeting from previous Thursday because of the tragic loss of Kathy Lopez, and we were able to meet yesterday, though. We met yesterday and we reviewed the audit statements that you'll see here this evening, as well as the financial statements for last fiscal year. We reviewed the basics of another presentation we heard this evening, which is the ability to move forward with design and bid phase on the 2 major high school renovations, including the marching band expansion room, the pool at Plymouth High School, and the theater. And then we also discussed the Chromebook purchase that the administration was just able to do. So through some really good detective work and luck, they were able to purchase an additional 2,200 Chromebooks at a reasonable price, and that will help replace some of the aging devices that we have in the district. Of those 2,200, 124 are also going to be used by the adult ed department, and those will be paid for separately from a grant program that they have as part of that process. So that was our F&O meeting yesterday. Our next F&O meeting will be on Thursday, November 5th, 2020 at 5 p.m.
Okay, thank you. So now we are to D, Administrative Reports and Recommendations. First up is Finance and Operations with Ms. Piaz.
Good evening. Today I want to introduce Nevra Kruger. She's the partner on our engagement from Plant and Moran CPAs. They recently concluded their work. You have a bunch of paper in front of you, but you have the general purpose financial statements, the single audit report, you have a board letter, and you have a graphical presentation that Nevra is going to present this evening. So I appreciate your attention, and Nevra.
Thank you, Debbie. Good evening, everyone. Great to see you all this evening. So as Debbie said, we have recently completed the audit of the June 30, 2020 financial statements. And as you know, all school districts in the state of Michigan are required to have an audit by state law. And so we've completed our audit in accordance with generally accepted accounting standards, and that's based on our review of your procedures, testing your transactions, and looking at your year-end balances. And I'm pleased to report that we've issued an unmodified or clean opinion, which is the highest form of opinion that we can provide, which really means at the end of the day that we are not aware of any adjustments that needed to be made to the financial statements. So congratulations. So in addition to the basic financial statements, we also take a look at your federal grants, your federal programs. And this year we focused our testing on the child nutrition cluster as well as Title I. And I'm again pleased to report that there were no findings or question costs as a result of our procedures. And I did want to note with the child nutrition cluster, you did receive a significant increase in federal funding related to the unanticipated school closure funds, which allowed you to help feed the community during the period of shutdown. And so those funds were subject to our audit. And again, no question, costs or findings as a result of that testing. Then in addition, you think you're done with those 2 audits, but we have one more. We take a look at your capital bond expenditures to ensure those costs were spent in accordance with ballot language as well as state law. And again, pleased to report that there were no findings or question costs there. We also take a look at your internal controls to see if there's any deficiencies in your internal controls. And again, pleased to report that there were no deficiencies there. And as the district went to a remote state in March, we did test the controls around that to ensure that there were no gaps or holes, and we did not identify any, so congratulations. A few highlights from the year. You had another financially successful year. You completed your 4th year of the enhancement millage. This past spring, you successfully were able to issue your 2020 school building and site bonds. You continue to operate within your budget. This past year, you spent about $7.4 million of capital investments that were made through those bond funds. And really what that allows you to do is you free up your general fund dollars so then you can actually spend that money in the classroom. So you're able to make those capital improvements but still dedicate the money to the classroom. And the bonds, which are supported by taxpayers, there was no millage rate increase that was needed this past year. So before I get into the results of the 2020 school year, I did want to highlight just the continued uncertainty that there is around K-12 funding. So as the pandemic hit in March, the state, in the weeks leading up to the May Revenue Estimating Conference, they had significant concerns about a potential shortfall in the school aid fund of up to $1 billion. And that's a billion with a B. And which really what that equated to was about $650 to $700 per pupil cut that you were potentially looking at receiving in June after you've already essentially spent all of your money, the school year was over. So there was obviously a lot of concern. So as the state got better visibility in the summer months, what ultimately ended up happening is instead of receiving a $650 or $700 per pupil cut, you did receive a $175 per pupil reduction. And again, this is after all the expenditures were spent. So, you are going to have to make difficult budgeting decisions as you go into 2020, 2021. There continues to be unknowns in terms of what the ultimate impact of the pandemic is on the state's economy as well as the school aid fund. You are receiving some one-time revenue from the state as well as federal sources. So you want to make sure that you strategically utilize those sources, especially as you're considering your educational delivery model, which right now is virtual and then a hybrid model as well. So, managing your fund balance in the future will be a key to the district's continued success as you navigate these unprecedented times. Okay, so let's get to June 30, 2020. So this first graph represents your balance sheet, which is a snapshot in time. So the general fund, which is your main operating fund, had assets of $62 million at the end of the year, which primarily that's made up of your cash and investments as well as your July and August state aid receivables. The general fund had liabilities of $22.5 million, and the majority of those liabilities relate to the 26 paid teachers that have rendered their services as of June, but are getting paid throughout the summer months. So when you take assets minus liabilities, you're left with your fund balance at June 30, 2020 of $39.5 million. And that's broken up into 3 different buckets. Your non-spendable of $181,000, your assigned fund balance of $13.1, and what this number represents is back in June, when you adopted your 2020-2021 budget, you were budgeting a use of fund balance of $13.1 million. So that's why this amount is shown assigned as of June 30, 2020. And then you're left with an unassigned fund balance of $26.2 million. Now your special revenue funds, those consist of your food service funds, your community service, and Act 18, and they're used to account for the revenue sources, and then those expenditures are restricted for those specific purposes that the funds were set up for. Your debt service funds, these funds, they collect the property taxes and as well as record interest, and then ultimately they pay the principal and interest on your long-term debt. And then finally, your capital project funds. The majority of these funds consists of your 2015, your 2019, and your 2020 capital project funds. And they're used to record the bond proceeds and then also record the expenditures related to those proceeds. So now this next graph represents your statement of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balance. So within the general fund, which is the fund that we'll focus on, you'll see halfway down the graph, changes in fund balance of about 1.7 million. So that essentially means that your revenue exceeded your expenditures for June 30, 2020. And the one other item that I will point out is if you go all the way over in the changes in fund balance total column, you'll see a big change in fund balance of about 102 million. So the majority of this change is actually driven by the fact that the bond passed in the spring and you received 100 million in proceeds. So that's really what's driving that change. All right, this next graph represents your general fund revenue. So of the 173 million of revenue that you received, about 75% of this revenue is coming from state sources, and about 18% comes from your local sources, which would be your property taxes. And then 6% comes from inter-district sources, and included in these amounts are the enhancement millage, as well as the Act 18 funding, as well as your federal grants. So this graph really gives you perspective how dependent you are on the state of Michigan for your funding. So any changes to that really does have an impact on this graph. So this next slide represents your per pupil foundation allowance for this past year, and it compares it to other districts that are of similar size or geographic location. And so you can see that Plymouth is on the lowest end here in the teal and the lime green. So you're the lowest in terms of the peers, as well as the lowest in terms of the state base foundation allowance of $8,111 per pupil. And the average per pupil foundation allowance is $8,953, so you're below the average as well. Now this next slide takes a look at that same foundation allowance, but takes it from a historical perspective. So from 2009-10 through today. So you can see that it dipped in 2011-12 and 12 and 13 as you did receive cuts in funding, and then has increased since then. The one piece that we included in this graph really is, had school funding kept pace with a flat rate of inflation, we use the assumption of 1.4%, what would the funding look like today based on the 2009-10 foundation allowance? And so if you follow that graph up, had a funding kept rate, you'd receive $9,281 per pupil versus the $8,000 that you receive today. And one other thing just to keep a note here, the 175 that I mentioned that the state took away from you this past year, that is not included in this graph. They did not, cut the foundation allowance, they just took it off the top. So, and this is the 8,111 is what you will have for the 2020-21 school year. All right, so we all know that student enrollment is a main driver of the revenue for your district. It's your student enrollment times your foundation allowance equals the revenue that you get. So this slide represents your blended student count over the past 5 years. And then it also includes the budget amount, and this is the amount that you adopted as part of that June 2020 budget adoption for this upcoming fiscal year. And so you can see it is a slight decrease that you did budget, and it sounds like the audited numbers should be coming in, and so you'll have the results in a few weeks. All right, then this next graph, I had mentioned the enhancement millage. This shows the total revenue that you do receive from the enhancement millage. And so this is something that started back in 2017, and the district receives a little more than $6 million each year from this millage. Now this millage is set to expire in 2021, unless it's renewed. However, it is important to note if it is renewed, Plymouth will receive less funding because charter schools are now included in the calculation. And then you'll see that this graph also has the gray piece as well as the blue piece. The blue piece represents the catch-up amount of the enhancement millage. So there was a true-up calculation that was done, and so the true-up represents the $905,000 that you received in 19, the true-up from 17 and 18, and the $400,000 that you received in 2020 was the true-up from the 2019. All right, so now we'll switch gears to the expense side of things. So this graph represents your general fund expenditures by function. And so as you can see, of your total expenditures of $171 million, the majority of them are for instruction and instructional support at 75%. And this includes teacher salaries and wages, classroom supplies, parapros, and subs. And then there's operations and maintenance at 8.4% and transportation at 4.4%. Now this graph takes a look at your expenditures by object. So essentially, how did you spend the money? So being a service-driven organization, the vast majority of the district's operating expenses are spent on personnel-related expenses, so salaries and benefits. And you can see here for June 30, 2020, you had about 84.8% spent on salaries and fringe benefits. And then you have purchase services at 9.6%, so this would include your transportation and custodial expenses. And then supplies and materials are at 4.5%, and this would include items such as fuel for buses, textbooks, and your water and sewage expenses. All right, now this next graph looks at your retirement funding, inclusive of your legacy costs, and really shows the retirement expense from 2016 through today. So as you can see, this is a large expense for the district, and this is a mandated expense. You have no control over this expense. You're required to pay it in. Now it is broken up into two sections because the state does help subsidize some of this cost. So the orange piece, which in 2020 was $11.7 million, you received what's called the UAAL stabilization funding from the state. So what happens is the state of Michigan pays you this $11.7 million, and then what you're required to do is immediately take that money and pay it into the Office of Retirement. So it's an in and an out. You don't get to spend this money on operating expenses. And so then the remainder, that $25 million, that's the district's portion of the retirement expense. And just to give some perspective, the rate of your covered payroll has increased from about 17% in 2010 to about 30% in 2020. So that's a significant increase in the percentage that you're required to pay into the retirement system. And this is retirement for folks that have already retired, not your current employees. Okay, so now this next slide looks at your fund balance history over the past 5 years. So the green bar represents your total fund balance, and then the orange bar represents your fund balance that is considered unassigned. And so you can see here in 2020, the orange piece was 15.3%. Now you'll see a blue line going across the graph just about at the $25 million mark. And what this line represents is Michigan school business officials, they recommend districts maintain a fund balance as a percentage of expenditures at about 15%. And so this line shows where that amount is for the district. And then you do see a lower line, the red line. You don't want to be anywhere near the red line. This is the early warning trigger at 5% of revenue. So you can see here that the district is above both of those lines. And so, finally, we want to share some reasons as to why it's important to have fund balance. First, it allows for flexibility in your cash flow and reduces the district's need to borrow to fund your operations. It helps you from preventing you from operating in a structural deficit, and it really allows for that flexibility in spending during the year, really, for those unexpected expenses. And at the end of the day, it also helps you maintain your credit rating, which also reduces your interest expenses. And then I did have in here, too, it provides cushion for unexpected circumstances, such as the enhancement millage not being renewed, or really the uncertainty that there is around K-12 funding. So that concludes our presentation. I did want to thank Debbie and Devin for their assistance during the audit. We did perform the audit virtually this year, so it was a learning curve for everyone, but they were very well prepared for the audit, and we encountered no difficulties. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Did you have anything, Patrick?
I just wanted to again thank Mr. Kling and Ms. Piaz for all the hard work that went into this. Doing an audit virtually is a challenging process, and with our partners at Plant Moran, they did a great job. It was a little bit more work, but we got a great result, and I'm really appreciative of all the effort that went into this. I also wanted to remind the community that that our fund balance is very important to what we do and to provide those kinds of cushion. What you see in the process that we showed here tonight is a planned use of fund balance based upon where we expect it to be in the budget. We received late information because we have to present our budget by June 30th, and the state of Michigan did not actually pass their budget until well after that, and we were expecting a significant reduction, but that reduction is not happening. So we're going to see not as much planned use of fund balance this year, which is a really good thing for us, and we will see that in the revised mid-year budget amendment that we do.
Thank you very much. We really appreciate this. So now we are at action item 211023. Consider approval of a resolution, annual financial audit reports for fiscal year 2019-2020, first and final reading. I am looking for a motion.
Madam President, I move that we consider approval of a resolution, annual financial audit reports for fiscal year 2019 to 2020, first and final reading, action item 211023.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, it has been moved by Member Kehoe and seconded by Member Brooks that we consider approval of a resolution, annual financial audit reports for fiscal year 2019-2020, first and final reading, action item 21.
Dr. Lilly, did the video just get cut off, or am I the only one that's not seeing it?
No, it's cut off.
It's cut off. Yeah, I knew from Kathy it's cut off.
Okay, is somebody sending a note to Nick?
Yeah, I'm texting him now.
Thank you so much.
Nick's working on it right now.
Are we okay? Or?
We're off again.
I know, I keep seeing that low battery sign. I wonder what he's using that is giving him that low battery sign.
Yeah, I don't know how it's actually set up. I was just texting Anthony in the audience to say like what.
Yeah, I just texted Nick too. So I know we lost the video and audio feed twice, so we'll see what happens. Because it popped back on and then, I don't know. Are we the only ones on here?
Are you aware that
What's that?
we all can hear you?
Oh, there's only like 5 of us. Well, how many are, yeah, just 5 or 6.
Yeah, 5 of us.
That's the new phone.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm glad I have you, because otherwise I'd be wondering, like, I'm lost. It is so hard, I'm telling you, to be quarantined. This is like driving me insane.
I know. How are you feeling?
You know, I feel fine. And I really do think it's just the stress of everything with my full-time job and this and campaigning. My body just went poof. But you know, with my son, I worry.
Hey, team, we can hear you.
I know.
To like,
Team,
you know,
We can hear you on this
Hey
end.
guys, just so you know, we're still live. So we're just plugging the camera in really quickly, so we'll just be a quick second. We can continue with the meeting. This camera's just picking up Zoom. So.
All right, so we had a motion and it was seconded. Member Kehoe.
I reached out to Debbie too, because I know she was right next to Nick.
And Member Brooks seconded the motion. Who is going to walk us through what we are voting on? Is it Patrick or Debbie?
Debbie, do you want to do it? You want me to? There we go.
I can. It's the annual acceptance of the audit by the Board of Education. So this is an annual event that we do once a year, and so I would appreciate support on the agenda resolution.
Thank you so much. Is Anupam able to join us? Because we need to take a vote. I don't think she can. Anupam, are you able to hear us? Okay. Maybe, all right, we'll wait a minute.
Are we back on? Because we got cut off twice.
Yeah, they're fixing the video. Anupam, can you hear us?
I can now, but for a while it was blank.
Okay, great.
Okay.
We're back on with video and audio. So did you hear the resolution?
No, I heard nothing.
Do we want to start over, Patty?
Okay, so we are considering approval of a resolution, annual financial audit reports for fiscal year 2019-2020, action item 211023. It was moved by Member Kehoe and seconded by Member Brooks. And this is the acceptance of the audit. We just heard the presentation. You were here for the presentation?
I heard the presentation.
Okay.
And then as you moved to the action item, then the whole thing went blank.
Okay, so this is just where we have to accept this. This is an annual event that we do. Member Brooks, can you take us through a roll call vote, please?
Sure. First member Berninski.
Yes.
Member Brooks, yes. Member Kehoe.
Yes.
Member Lazarowitz.
Yes.
Member McCoyne.
Yes.
Member Sadoo.
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0.
Hey, thank you very much, and thank you so much for all of your hard work. We really do appreciate it. Our next up is consider approval to begin design and bid phase for bid package HS1 and
HS1 and HS2.
HS1 and HS2, first reading. Ms. Piaz is ready.
Good evening. This evening, we have Brian Gessman from Northern Smith, but we also have Jared Pinkley today from CMP. This is HS1, which is a construction of a new performing arts center at Salem High School, and HS2, the construction of an auditorium, multi-purpose room, and band room additions at Plymouth High School. This takes a long time to design and bid, so we are starting very early. But this is work will be done in 2022. And so we're going to take you through some personal comments. Brian's going to take you through the information, and then we'll move forward and detail the rest of it. Jasmine?
Good evening. My name is Brian Gessman from McCarthy & Smith. I am accompanied by Jared Pinkley from TNP Architecture. As Debbie had alluded, we're here to talk about our next wave of projects for the 2020 bond. The two projects we're bringing forth today are HS1 and HS2 as previously identified. And today we're going to go through kind of some of the outlines of what this looks like. As we pull this thing up, as Debbie kind of alluded, and Nick, if you want to go to there you go, that bar chart. The rationale for why we want to bring this to your attention today. As you will see throughout the course of this bond, we see in front of you today is a breakdown of what those projects look like. You see 3 different color bars. You see blue, you see red, and you see green. The blue is indicative of the design process. So as you see, we want to get an early start on the design process in 2020 for a bidding effort in 2021 and construction in 2022. What is entailed with this design process is bringing along all of the district administration, the building stakeholders, coaches, staff. We have to collect all these comments and considerations and to put together on paper, work collaboratively to then again have a project that we would be ready for bidding out in the year 2021 for construction in 2022. As we move to the next slides, this is something that was included in the original bond proposal. So these are not fixed drawings. These are ideas, concepts, and initial jump-off points, so to speak, on how we want to start these conversations. So what you see today is bid package HS1, which represents the, I think, highly anticipated Salem Auditorium remodel and addition. The area highlighted or inclusive of the red dashed bubble is the areas that we're talking about. So HS1 is inclusive of the auditorium remodeling, the dressing room and scene shop addition. You will note that there are some items outside of that red bubble. Test. Good. You want me to sit tight? Test? Good? All right. Inclusive of that red bubble is what we're planning to proceed with on HS1. Outside of that bubble are additional projects included in the 2020 bond, but you will be seeing those forthcoming in future bid packages. This is kind of a bird's eye view of that same project and how that would potentially get situated onto the existing building. Again, these are concepts. These are things that we would then bring to the building stakeholders, the district administration, to start conceptualizing what that final design wants to look like. Next is HS2. So this is at Plymouth High School. This is the natatorium edition, the auxiliary gym and multi-purpose room edition, as well as the band and storage edition. Again, as I want to remind, these are kind of general concepts, general ideas of where these would be located, but the final design would obviously be reflective of the conversations and collaboration that takes place between ourselves, the district, and building stakeholders. Finally, again, a bird's eye view, so to speak, on where these additions would fall on the property itself. One thing that we did talk about at the F&O meeting, if approved to move forward with the design, the plan would be to, as these designs get developed, bring the plans back to the district, see where that shakes out as far as from a budget standpoint, as well as the overall conceptual design, to make sure that the entire team is on the same page on how we'd like to move forward. With that is pretty much it. Again, today's topic of conversation is really just to move forward with developing this design, and would be happy to field any questions that you may have.
All right, so we'll start over here with Ms. Berninsky. Do you have any questions? Okay, Mr. Keough.
Yeah, I want to thank the team at McCarthy and Smith and TMP Architects. As we discussed at the F&O meeting, there'll be regular updates through the F&O team as well as to the rest of the board as we go through the design process here to make sure that we understand the overall scope, and that as there are any substantial changes that might come from the envision process, to give us all a chance to weigh in. And we'll do that early in the process, or actually about midway through the process, when they get a real sense for what that design will look like before they complete the architectural drawings and all the other work there to go out to bid. But it'll give us a chance to make sure that if there are any objections, concerns, opportunities to review, we have those chances before we go out to the bid process. As with all the bids that we're doing in this part of this bond program, everything will go out to a competitive bid. And when those competitive bids come back, we have another chance to review those bids at the F&O meeting. They go back through through the board process where we approve those bids, and only then does construction actually begin. So the only thing we're doing right now is approving the process to start the design and the bid work as part of this. So we're excited to move these projects forward. We know that these are long-awaited improvements in the district and will help bring up our facilities to a modern standard and provide equity across the district. And I appreciate the support from the community for supporting us on this bond and moving these projects forward.
Doug, do you have anything? John?
You said that you'll have the stakeholders, their opinions in the process.
Most certainly. So that's something that we've actually very recently been talking about as far as developing that list, which will be a meeting in and of itself. But most certainly we'll have all facets of employees and volunteers to have input on how this wants to move forward and how this wants to look.
And the board will get a preview of what the stakeholders want
Most certainly.
before any work gets done?
Most certainly.
Okay, thank you.
Anupam?
Thank you. No, I was able to be part of this conversation yesterday where we discussed this thoroughly. I appreciate the whole conversation around getting community involvement and the regular updates to the board around all of this process. I do hope that Dalton and his friends are listening, or someone can relay the message that their vision and their encouragement and advocacy around the Salem Auditorium is coming to fruition. So I am thinking about Dalton and many of those students who have come to us about the need for the Salem Auditorium.
Okay, yeah, I was also thinking about this would have been the night for Dalton and Aiden to be here, but they will have plenty of opportunities to come as this moves forward. This is very exciting. I think this, our last in-person board meeting was actually the night of the bond election. So I think this is very exciting that that was the last meeting, and now we are here and we're actually seeing what comes of it when that was passed by the community. So this is a direct result, as Mr. Keough said, of the support of the community to have these things moving forward. So it's very exciting for our students. It will give them some of the equity that they deserve to have in their educational programs, and I really appreciate the support. Thank you so much for this.
Thank you.
Our next item is, where are we? Superintendent's report.
Thank you, President McCoyne. This evening, we're here to complete our reconfirmation meeting. As you recall, this is a requirement of MCL 3881698A of the State School Act. These are the recent changes in legislation that require all school districts to complete an extended continuity of learning plan. We have to have it approved by the Board of Education originally by October the 1st. Then we have to post that plan to our transparency link, which is done. That's on our website, and we forward this to CEPI. This plan, of course, is a fluid plan. We have to have assurances in our plan, information about how we are delivering instruction, our mitigation plans, all of those are a part of the plan. As you know, every 30 days, we must review this plan with the Board of Education and reconfirm how we are delivering instruction and if anything has changed. So our last plan, of course, was approved on September the 29th. At that time, we had two instructional delivery models that we were using here in P-CCS. The first being the P-CCS Virtual Academy. That's our 100% virtual model, where students and families could choose at a minimum of a commitment one semester or one trimester for the Virtual Academy, but we are guaranteeing that Virtual Academy option for the entire year. The second model is our Safe Start Remote Learning with P-CCS, and if you recall, that model began with 100% virtual with a planned phased-in approach to in-person learning. On October the 9th, at a special meeting, the Board of Education approved the elementary instructional plan for Safe Start Remote Learning, and that allowed our kindergarten through fifth grade students, to begin phasing in to receive in-person learning through a half-day hybrid model. And that has been a very successful start. As you know, this week, we completed our phased in with our 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade students, and As I shared, I think at the last meeting, it's almost felt like the first day of school all over again. So it's such joy having our students back here in the building. Now, during this time period, our 6th through 12th grade students have continued to receive their instruction remotely as our committee worked together to come up with a hybrid plan that would begin developing or returning our secondary students to in-person learning. So during this reconfirmation meeting this evening, we must reconfirm the instructional model that we will be using moving forward. This will include how our instruction will be delivered at each grade level, whether the district is providing higher levels of instruction to specialized populations of students. As a part of this process, it is necessary and required that we allow for public comment on how instruction is going, and so we will do that through citizens' comments prior to you being asked to vote to approve this reconfirmation. And also as a part of this presentation, we must announce our two-way interaction rate. So that's our participation rates in our program, and that also must be posted to our transparency reporting link. In terms of our meeting last evening, we had quite a large discussion about our secondary instructional model. As I shared, it was originally our intention to move forward with a plan or a recommendation on how to return our secondary students through a hybrid model. So at this point, when we look at our plan, nothing has changed for our elementary, but we need to talk in a little bit more detail about what this looks like for secondary. So this evening, I'm going to walk the board and our community through the required elements of this reconfirmation meeting. As we explained in that detailed workshop last evening, we're not implementing any changes at the elementary level. However, we are recommending a delay in the return of our secondary students. This is our grades 6 through 12 students to in-person learning until a time that it is determined that we can bring them back. Right now, we're recommending that to be at the end of the first semester, so the beginning of the second semester. And this recommendation, as we shared extensively last night, is based on the recent increase in the COVID-19 transmission rate in our area and guidance from the Wayne County Health Department. We're making this recommendation really to stay on course with our secondary students and allow them to continue to receive instruction in this fully remote environment once again through January 22nd, 2021. As we discussed last night, we will ask that our building design teams develop plans that will allow small groups of our secondary students to receive in-person support, including specialized classes throughout the remainder of this first semester. I think that it is important before going through those instructional delivery models to revisit our discussion last night in terms of our health and data and the metrics that we use as we determine any decisions around in-person learning. I want to make sure to continue to emphasize tonight, as I did last evening, that there is not one metric that we use when we make these decisions, but there are multiple metrics. Actually, as a part of the roadmap, we are required to look at specific elements as it relates to making decisions for in-person learning. So I just want to walk through, again, these various metrics that we consider, the first being the Wayne County Schools COVID-19 report. This comes out every single week, and these are 6 different metrics that are included. These include the total number of confirmed cases reported in Wayne County, and Wayne County is Wayne County exclusive of Detroit, the 7-day percent positivity rate in the county, hospital occupancy rate for inpatient beds as well as ICU beds, and the testing capacity rate in Wayne County, as well as the number of outbreak events in Wayne County. The second piece of information that we review daily is the COVID Act Now website. This really puts this information in graph form. It makes it easier to read and to understand. And once again, COVID Act Now is a team of technologists, epidemiologists, health experts, public policy makers. They're all working to provide this data and analysis for us for COVID-19. And so we encourage our community to continue to monitor this piece of information as well. We're also sharing with you the Michigan data portals. These can be found directly on the michigan.gov website, and those are multiple data points that we review. In addition, when we look locally, we review our weekly dashboard for P-CCS municipalities. These are our local data reports. As you know, our While at School committee has Dr. Summers, Dr. Boosin are a part of that community as well. Our nurse Atsit, I believe Nurse Atsit is here on the phone with us, and Dr. Summers is supposed to be joining us. I'm not quite sure, is she here at this time, but we may have an opportunity to ask some questions as well. She provides that report with our local information so that we are able to review that on a weekly basis. Tonight, as I did last night, I do want to spend some time walking through that next data point, which is the community spread risk dashboard for school districts. Now, with this community spread dashboard, this is what is published every Wednesday by the Wayne County Health Department, and so we have a link that is on our website to that department. And as we shared yesterday, last week, many of us were caught by surprise to see that our risk level increased from a level B to a level E in last week's time periods. And level E is the highest level in terms of that risk level. And once again, that risk level is looking at the community spread in our local areas. I wanted to share that in order to determine those risk levels, Wayne County Health Department uses 3 primary measurements. One is their average cases per day per million population. The next is the trend line, and that really looks at where our community is over the weeks based on the number of cases per million. So are we going up? Are we going down? Are we stable? And the final factor they look at is the test positivity rate. Now that is actually for Wayne County, whereas the other 2 are specific to Canton, Plymouth Township, and the city of Plymouth. And that really measures just our test positivity as I share. All 3 of these measurements are given a rating, and they're factored in to come up with a final risk level. And this risk level is to estimate, once again, what is the risk of community spread. So as I shared last week, the week before, 2 weeks before, we were level D, then we moved to level B, and then last week we moved to the highest level, which is level E. So with the support of Wayne RESA, all Wayne County superintendents were able to meet this past Friday with representatives from Wayne County Health Department to discuss why our numbers moved so quickly. And as I shared with you last night, the health department really shared that this rapid change in level was driven by a doubling of cases in Wayne County over that period. And in particular, they said a 3 to 4 day period. We went from the previous week, we had 700 cases, to that week we had 1,600 cases, and they're still increasing. They really said that they believe it's too soon to determine that definitively that what is happening here, it could be an anomaly, but they do truly believe that there is a significant increase of our COVID-19 rates, and so they want to continue to monitor and advise. So their recommendation to us as school districts is to base our instructional models on the 2 weeks worth of data instead of saying, hey, this week we're at level E, so now let's shut everything down, because just as quickly as we change from B to D, we want to make sure and see what happens in the next 2 weeks. But they also advise to continue whatever current mode of instruction that we are using as long as we have an approved mitigation plan in place. And we do have our approved mitigation plan in place from Wayne County. So specifically, if you think about our district, as I shared, at an elementary level, we are currently delivering instruction in a hybrid model. So that recommendation would be to continue to deliver instruction in a hybrid model for our elementary school students as we monitor the data over the next couple of weeks. For our secondary students, we are currently delivering instruction in a fully remote model. So that recommendation would be to continue to deliver instruction in this fully remote model as we once again continue to monitor the data. Now, one thing that is very clear is that the Wayne County Health Division will issue stricter guidelines that could include the suspension of in-person learning even for our K-5 students. And if at any point they're looking at the data and they believe that those levels are too high for us to continue in an in-person environment. One thing I shared last evening, and I want to reemphasize, that what Wayne County Health Department provides recommendations, and we as local school districts are required as a part of the roadmap to work in consultation with our local health department. They recommend, and then we make the final decision as it relates to those models. But as I also shared, we really work in conjunction with the health department. We see ourselves as the educators, they are the scientists, the doctors, and looking and taking their advisement, working very closely with them with that. So with that being said, as we talked last evening, I want to just walk us through, I guess I could share a couple more of those data points, I'm sorry. A couple more data points that we had up there. I can't read upside down. I think we talked about the matrix, the school-associated cases. So this is also required by law that any, within 24 hours, any cases that we have here at our school district, we must report. We give communication at that school level, and then we put that on our website, so that is located there as well. And then I did have a final conversation yesterday about that matrix. When we look at the matrix that had been shared by the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, that matrix really is a tool to be used with local health departments as they guide school districts in making decisions. And so they have removed that matrix from their website. They have asked us to do the same, so they're working through. I'm not sure if they will repost that. If they do, we will repost it as well. But at this point, that matrix is, as they've always said, it is intended to be a document to work with the health departments and school districts, not intended as a public-facing document. So we'll let you know in the future what they determine to do with that. But we still have that website posted for information for our families. Today, I was able to share with our entire community, as well as our staff and families, just this information. I also shared with them a copy of a letter that I received from the Wayne County Health Division. I shared that letter with you last evening, and that is really where they're talking in more detail about our risk level and any recommendations that they would give to the school district. So I wanted to make sure that our families, as they watch this meeting tonight, that they were aware of that recommendation, and that why that has caused us to then move forward at this space and recommend that we delay returning our 6th through 12th grade students to in-person learning. So as we're going through, I just want to just quickly and briefly just review our delivery instruction models, this recommendation, and then really leave time to have some questions or continued discussions from last evening. So once again, if you look at this slide, when we look at our instructional delivery model, nothing has changed from what we're currently doing. With our pre-kindergarten students, there's a blend of in-person learning as well as virtual learning that meets the needs of our families. We're offering both approaches. With elementary, we have Say Start remote learning with P-CCS, and we are currently doing the hybrid half-day model for our K through 5 students with an AM/PM cohort, and so they are learning live instruction with their teachers while they are here, and then working asynchronously when they are home in either the afternoon or the morning. And once again, that has been a very successful model for us. At the same time, we are continuing with the 100% virtual option in the virtual academy for our elementary school students. Now, when we look to our secondary model, last night we ended up going through just that first recommendation as we shared. That's the consideration of remaining virtually for our 6 to 12 students for the second semester, so that would be through January 22nd. I also just wanted to, for those that did not have an opportunity to review that workshop yesterday, put that final option slide there, and you will see it's a link to that meeting yesterday, so I want anybody in the public that did not view the meeting to have an opportunity to do so. That second, if it were not the will of the board to move forward with that recommendation, we did come back with a hybrid model. We shared data yesterday. We talked about really the feedback that was provided from our students, from our staff, from our families. Really, across the board, no one is completely satisfied with a hybrid model at all. We really had parents that either wanted to be fully back face-to-face or parents that wanted to remain remote. But as we looked to the feedback, we really developed a recommendation that would almost use like a phased in of all three, beginning initially with returning our 6th grade students, as well as our students with specialized programs, to really explain what those specialized classes would be. That would be the first wave of students that would come back on November the 30th. Then we would return our 9th grade students on December 7th, return our 7th and 8th grade students on January 7th, and then return our 10th, 11th, and 12th grade students on January the 25th. And once again, with this process, making sure that we provide opportunities throughout that semester for some in-person learning for smaller groups of students. So that still was the option that was on the table. We then, of course, ended with that recommendation that is here for your consideration this evening, and that is to continue in a fully virtual model in grades 6 through 12 until the second semester, while providing opportunities for small group instruction, including specialized classes throughout the remainder of the semester. So at this point, I would like to open up the floor, turn it back to President McCoyne to continue with any questions that you may have considering the model. After that, we will come back and talk a little bit more about our participation rates. That is a component of this plan, and I think that there is one more slide after that. We're going to talk about our mitigation plan. So just pause here and have any questions that you may have that we did not answer about the instructional delivery models yesterday.
Okay, Doug, do you have any questions? Okay. Patrick?
I've got a couple of questions. We spoke a little bit about this yesterday, and I'd like to revisit this. We've made the decision to make a recommendation to have us not proceed with the secondary model, but we are making, based upon the Wayne County Health recommendation, to proceed with the elementary program that we have in place. I've heard really great things from the teachers and from the families that have been part of that program, that they really are enjoying being back in person. But I also am hearing fear and concerns about whether it is safe to do that, especially with the rising numbers. And I wonder whether we have Nurse Atsit or anybody from the safety committee that could give us some context or information as to the safety of that process.
So Nurse Atsit is here on the call, as well as Dr. Summers. So I will lead it up to the two of you to begin.
I'll have Dr. Summers give a little bit of a summary, because as we talked in the past, we look at transmission metrics in the surrounding area, but we also look at our strict mitigation measures, and you can't separate those when looking at keeping our students safe and trying to decrease the transmission of COVID-19 in the schools. So Dr. Summers, did you want to go first? Okay, sorry, I was trying to unmute. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so I may have missed the very first part of that question. So I think the question was about the elementary schools, whether there are concerns about the safety.
That's correct.
Correct.
Okay, so everything I've heard thus far is that so far in Plymouth, the start has gone well, that the children as well as teachers and staff are adhering to the mitigation measures that they're responsible for, and the school really has put a lot of measures into place, including, I was really happy to hear about the air purifiers that have been placed into the classrooms. So in my mind, the mitigation strategies that we have in our arsenal have been really maxed out, and the school district has done a really good job of making sure all of the protocols are in place that I would recommend at this time. I would also emphasize that as we've talked about earlier in the summer, that we do believe and still believe that the risk of disease and clinical illness in the youngest children is a lot less than in older kids and adults. And the transition to higher risk probably starts around puberty or around the middle school age range. So looking at the elementary schools as a starting point, right now the signs are pointing to it, things are going well. We are not seeing evidence of within school transmission, definitely not in the Plymouth School District yet. And I'll just emphasize too that when kids or teachers are quarantined, that's a preventative measure. So that's actually a good thing. It doesn't necessarily mean that there's an outbreak when we hear about quarantining happening. That's one of our preventative measures in order to ensure that a single case or a handful of cases don't spin out of control.
Thank you.
And I'd like to piggyback on that when we talk about the safety in school. As Superintendent Merritt mentioned yesterday and in earlier meetings as well, is that certainly COVID-19 is here, and what we can do, we can't manage what happens outside the four walls of our school buildings, but we can manage what happens inside our four walls. I know that we're posting the positive cases, and you may see that there are some schools that may have more than one positive case. We do not have any outbreaks in Plymouth Canton schools. An outbreak is defined as 2 or more COVID-19 cases who have a shared exposure on school grounds and are from different households. We do have cases identified in a school, but they to date have not had any shared exposure at school. So we have not had any transmissions that have been acquired, transmission of COVID-19 that have been acquired in the school. With the addition of the 4 school nurses, we are working diligently when we do have the identification of a positive case to identify close contacts very, very quickly, notify the parents of those close contacts or staff members who may be close contacts, and providing case identification letters for the entire school so that they are aware that there was a case, but yet, as the letter states, it's for informational reasons only, and there is no action that needs to be taken. So again, we have been managing this very successfully. And just to reiterate again, we do not have any outbreaks in Plymouth Canton Community Schools to date.
And I will share, when we talk about the elementary model and the difference with the secondary model, we have the ability at the elementary level to cohort our students. So while they're there in a reduced density, so we're achieving the 6 feet of social distancing, a smaller amount of students, and they don't have transitions throughout the day. It's a half-day model, so they stay within their classroom, within their teacher, and then they leave at that halfway component of the day. When we look at our secondary students, just by the nature of their schedule, they have 6 different teachers, and they have to have movement throughout the day. And anytime we have transitions, you're increasing your risk exposure. So that is, although we have plans in place, and we would work strongly to mitigate those plans, of course there's a greater risk when you have secondary students that are moving throughout their schedule. So that is a difference. Now, when we were looking at the model for returning, and eventually when we do look to return our students, because that ultimately is the goal, is to try to get our students back safely into an in-person learning, we want to look at ways that we can minimize those transitions and work to keep our students and staff as safe as possible. And those are some of the things that we shared with you last evening as a part of the hybrid plan. But at this point, based on that recommendation of pausing, it's giving a couple of weeks to continue to monitor this data, once again, to see if this is an anomaly or if we're truly looking at this significant increase. And we would want to make sure that we're working hand in hand with the health department in terms of our educational plans in person moving forward.
Thank you for that update. I just wanted to also say that I've been reading the same things, that in general, when the mitigation strategies and the practices are done at school, they're not seeing transmission there. So even though, and I think that the data that we're seeing is exactly consistent with that. That's correct?
Yes.
So I did have one question that you mentioned, Nurse Atsit, is you mentioned the notification when there is a case in the school. Do we do that notification to the classroom, to the school? How do we let people know that, I mean, obviously I know that those people that are confirmed close contacts are notified, but how do we let people know to manage the concerns and the fear that they may have associated when there are cases that originated outside the school but are yet those are people that were in the building?
Right, and that's exactly what we're experiencing is the origination of the cases outside the school, and then because a staff or student is in the school, that we're managing that as a result of that. The Wayne County Health Department has provided us with template letters, and there are 2 specific letters. One is a case identification letter, which we send to the entire school, that school community. We cannot mention any student or staff identifying information. That's against HIPAA. And and privacy and confidentiality laws, so we cannot identify that, but we can alert parents to know that this is present in the school. But parents, when receiving that letter, should be reassured that it states right in there in bold, this is informational only. Your child, there is no need to do any further action, and they should be reassured by that it's just a notification letter only. If a child or a staff was determined to be a close contact, we will contact them immediately. So, and that's the process that is, and the procedure that's followed for Plymouth Canton schools. So if you don't receive a call from the nurse or the administrator and a follow-up letter or email, then your child has not been exposed. But in full transparency and making sure that we want to alert our school community of what is going on in terms of health and safety, that we are going to send a letter each time we have an identified case of an individual that actually enters into the school, that is in the school. So again, if a parent or a staff member is not alerted immediately by the nurse or the administrator, and that happens very, very quickly, then you are safe to assume with 100% accuracy that you are not a close contact, and no worries. We would contact you directly.
I do want to share, in addition, I know that we've had some questions about our secondary students and why haven't I received a letter if there's a positive case. So according to the requirements, when we look at school-associated cases, that confirmed positive or a probable confirmed is what is reported, and it has to be on school facilities, on school grounds. So say, for example, a student is in the virtual academy or a teacher is teaching in the virtual academy and they test positive, but they've never been on school grounds. We would not report that information in our data. When we look at the high school right now, our students are learning virtually. However, many are participating in athletic events. So if we are informed that they have tested positive, then that is something that we report. Now that communication would only go to their team or those that were affected. Now, if we were back in-person learning for our secondary, then we would also have to give that notification that Nurse Atzett shared that would say, if you're not a close contact, it's just an FYI that this has occurred. So that's why those communications have only gone to teams right now at the secondary level, but in our elementary classrooms, when situations happen, that communication goes through the entire school. And the check and balance is that within 24 hours, those cases that are either confirmed positive or probable. And a probable is that person is been in contact with a positive case and or symptomatic. And so, oftentimes you'll see that on our website, switch over then to become a positive case once that is confirmed. And so with those cases, that check and balance, you can also look on their website within 24 hours and you should see that that case has been identified.
And to add to, we are working very, very closely with the Wayne County Health Department, very closely.
And I will share to that, thank you, Nurse Atzett, we are working closely, and also, although I said that their advice is to look at these metrics over a couple of weeks, at any time, as we work through them daily on cases, if there were a decision or a recommendation to close down a classroom or to close down a school and pivot to a fully remote model, we would do that. We would not wait for that 2 weeks if that became the recommendation.
I have more questions, but I'll let other people ask them.
John, do you have any questions?
The cleaning of the classrooms, if there's a case, what's the procedures? And do we have enough cleaning?
Ms. Pierce? Or Mr. Welch?
Yeah, so our cleaning procedures are as follows in the roadmap, the Safe School roadmap. So if there is a confirmed case in a classroom, that classroom is shut down for a period of 24 hours in order to do the sanitization with the electrostatic machine, and then we move forward from there. So those are the cleaning procedures. We have additional staff, cleaning assistants that are helping with the touch point cleaning during the day, as well as cleaning the bathrooms and then periodically throughout the day.
Thank you.
It is the system that we work so closely with the nurses, with our director of safety, that as soon as we get the confirmed case, that's a reported case, and that triggers the call out to Rich to get that cleaning going. I communicate to you as a board so that you are aware of the situation. The nurses are working with the principals to make sure that they're working on communication protocols, and all of that is kind of a rapid process that we work together with.
Okay, I wanted to real quick circle back to something that was said yesterday. So there was a question about if a child is out quarantined and can't be in school, if there would be a way for them to join a class remotely. And I do not believe it was the intention, but people in the community, some of them heard that the only reason we're not doing this is that the teachers will not agree to it. And I just would like to make it clear that it's not just something you can plug in and have it working immediately.
Absolutely not. So and I was the one who made that comment. So if that is someone's perception of my response, as I responded to board members' request to say, could this happen? I shared that in the data, we had teachers from the survey suggesting that this could be something that could be considered. And what I said is, by all means, we would not stop a teacher if they wanted to explore that. I did speak about contract language to say that we could not go in and say, hey, we're going to mandate that all teachers do this. And I wanted to also emphasize at that time, this is a lot of work. If you think about the requirements of teaching the students that are in front of you at the same time trying to monitor and provide instruction to students virtually, that's a lot of work. And so at this point, that was the communication that I made. We are exploring all options, as I talked about a meeting this week, to say collectively, how can we work together to provide support for our students at the same time, not putting too much on our teachers. And so that's where I always say that I have pride in our district and the ability to work together to really problem solve that. And so that by no means is saying or that trying to communicate that the teachers would refuse to do that. That was talking about survey data and looking at all ideas on how we can move forward together as a district to productively support our students who are in a quarantine situation.
Yeah, thank you. I did not believe that that's what you meant or that's what you were saying. I just wanted to clear it up for the community so that they understand that. It is a lot of work. Teachers would have to be monitoring students in the classroom, plus monitoring students at home who may or may not be having some technical difficulties. So that sounds like a lot of work. Plus, we would have equipment issues that we do not have at this point. Anupam, do you have any questions?
I don't have any questions, but I would like to share some comments, if that's okay, or do you want me to wait for that?
Go ahead.
All right, so I've been thinking a lot about all of the conversations as well as the emails and the feedback survey. And I understand the recommendation that's being proposed and understand the recommendations from the Wayne County Health Department. I would like to reiterate some of my comments and concerns. As stated a few times in the past, that we need to get more stakeholders involved with the planning and the creation of these plans as they're being drafted, so that we have a broad representation in the creation of these plans. These plans impact all of the stakeholders, including students, parents, and teachers, and their input is valuable. Many of the districts that have been referenced in the past conversations, including West Bloomfield, Livonia, Ann Arbor, and others, have had community represented at the table in these plans from the beginning. We may be able to avoid some of the communication gaps that exist if we get more stakeholder involvement early on in the process. The plans have changed so much over the past 4 months, and I understand the frustration from our community. As we've mentioned, we are committed to keeping students and staff safe in every way possible, regardless of the medium of the instructional delivery method. It has also been mentioned that we are not involved in the day-to-day operations. However, I would like to get more assurances, plans, and updates on how all students are getting the support they need for student success, because we are hearing about many students that are struggling, particularly in the complete virtual environment. At the end of the day, our common vision as a team of 8 is student success. Again, I wholeheartedly agree that the safety and the well-being of our staff, students, and families is a priority, and understand that the pandemic situation is getting worse. I understand the complexities of the situation and the rapid change of the data and information that is being presented to everyone. I also understand that having clear plans on when to be in person, when to be virtual, and when to be in quarantine, along with shutting down buildings when necessary, is really important, and to have that be clearly articulated. Our community has been challenged with misinformation and the gaps in information and communication. I wonder what plans are being formulated to bring parents along with regular and ongoing communication so they're getting direct information from the leadership. With all of that said, I particularly worry about the students that are really struggling and need to feel assured that every effort is being taken to support all of our students. We have talked about improvements in communication, consistency in teacher expectation, and response time for student support, and being able to think creatively in ways to better support our struggling students in the safest way possible. We've talked about bringing back small cohorts for face-to-face support in addition to our special ed and our specialized courses. We have seen and heard about kids who are struggling to get the support from their teachers and their building principals. I'm sure that these are the exceptions and not the norms, but their feelings are real, and we need to pay attention to the pleas that we're hearing from the students and the families. I want them to know we hear them and care about them, and that we are doing everything possible to figure out solutions for them. Again, I would like to see more creative ways to support students and build stronger connections through pods or small cohorts or other opportunities to support all students while we are in this virtual environment that is being proposed until January. Thank you.
Okay, I believe, Patrick, you just had a couple more questions?
Yeah, I
Do you
just
have-
wanted to
sorry.
understand the close contact rules. I know that those rules have changed over the last couple of weeks with the new guidance from the CDC. I don't know whether those are reflected in our policies and our guidance that we're doing.
In terms of our temporary guidance right now from Wayne County Health Department, although the conversations and what Trustee Kehoe is speaking to is the contact rate. So our initial definition is 6 feet for 15 minutes would be considered a close contact, and last week the CDC used the term cumulative minutes instead of consecutive minutes. So that would mean if you had less than 6 feet, 2 minutes here, up to cumulative within a 24-hour period, 15 minutes, that would still be considered a close contact. At our meeting on Friday, the Wayne County Health Department did affirm for us in school districts that recommendation is to still stick with the original definition of 6 feet, 15 consecutive minutes, not cumulative minutes in a time period. If that were to change, they would let us know, but right now we are moving forward with close contact based on guidance from the Wayne County Health Department as being 6 feet for 15 consecutive minutes would be, less than 6 feet, 15 consecutive minutes would be considered a close contact. Nurse Atsit, did I say that correctly?
Yes, you did.
All right.
So towards the end, I've heard tales in other states of people playing games where they move the kids around every 15 minutes or every 14 minutes to avoid the 15-minute process. We're not doing anything like that. Our people are not, in general, in close contact with teachers or with anybody in the work that they're doing.
Absolutely. We have our strict mitigation strategies and plans in place, and our staff is working to adhere to keep their students safe, to keep themselves safe. I would not say I would never expect that anybody in Plymouth Canton would try to game this system to move in students around. Our objective is to keep our students and our staff safe.
Okay, thank you.
Do you have more questions, Patrick, or is that
I just
it?
have one more question on the
Pardon me?
quarantine. On the quarantine process, Anupam asked the question already about the remote. I'm sorry, maybe it was Miss McCoy that asked the question about the students being in on quarantine. We're seeing more and more students and staff that end up being COVID positive. It's not happening in the classroom. It's not seeing transmission in the school. But are we going to What are we doing to help support those people in that scenario? Do we have enough subs to support when educators are quarantined and that process? And then what are we doing for those students that are out on quarantine? Because we now have got this complicated process where we've got people that are back in school and they love it, but I worry about those kids missing out on educational experiences if they do need to quarantine.
So your first question, we have a substitute shortage across our state that happened prior to COVID-19. That has become even a greater challenge when all schools across the state are dealing with quarantine, and that's even a close contact. That's the rigorous mitigation strategy that's in place, that even if you're never positive, but you're considered a close contact, you still have to quarantine for those 14 days. So we have worked within, I think we have all of our premier subs right now deployed within the classrooms. We've had to lean on and depend on our staff within the building, our literacy interventionists, our ELD, our teachers, our media center teachers at time, our special teachers at time, to really help to work together to support classrooms if we're not able to find subs. And that is trying and difficult and stressful for those teachers as well. And so we continue to try to find ways to increase our substitute pool. We're looking at contingency plans even in a situation where we have, for example, maybe an office staff is completely wiped out because of a quarantine type of situation. So kind of to that idea about K-5 and really trying to work our plans with K-5 to keep our students in school, utilizing our secondary staff to help assist. So if there's office staff, for example, at a secondary building that doesn't have students, being able to bring that staff down to assist at an office, for example, that's quarantined. Looking at also our para-educators and being able to redeploy those. So we're trying to find multiple ways collectively as a district to work to mitigate that shortage that is a real shortage. And so, that could be a conversation that we end up having later on if we're not able to cover classes. And so even trying to find creative ways, so it is a challenge, I will say for sure, but that's something that our Human Resources Department, working together with our various union leaderships, just talking about our collective effort to do that together. The question in terms of providing supports for students, I know that we've addressed that each week. Ms. Rail, I know you're here and maybe want to speak to some of the conversations that we're having right now. That is definitely a work in progress. In terms of, in general, any student that is absent, of course, has that right for their missed assignments. And so we want to make sure that at all times students would not be penalized for any time that they are not there, but we're also looking at additional creative ways to provide those levels of supports for students that may be in a situation where they're quarantined. Ms. Rail.
Yep. So earlier this evening, you approved the purchase of over 2,000 new devices. Those 2,000 devices that you purchased were also looking at earmarking for a second device for teachers to be able to use to Zoom into and out of the classroom for additional students who would be at home. Additionally, we are looking at, and we're posting a position called a homebound educator position to help support and liaison between the classroom teacher and students in a quarantine situation. So what we're trying to do is just look at a variety of strategies, because it's a very difficult situation all the way around. And we know that not any one-size-fits-all will work for all of our families. So for example, with our discussions with families, even out the gate, a lot of families say, I can't make it for synchronous learning time, so I need some support for asynchronous learning. So that's when we look at, and I know that as we talked about a spectrum, people heard the ends of the spectrum and thought there was nothing in between when we had these conversations originally. Well, that's where we look at that spectrum that runs anywhere from printed packets of instructional materials so that families can work on those after hours with support during live instruction from teachers. But we're really trying to look at a number of different strategies for students who are quarantined. And then, of course, we always have the end of that spectrum where the teacher is quarantined along with the student, so then it just becomes, again, a shift to a virtual environment. So we're looking at a number of different strategies to help support all of our students and ensure that they have full access to their education.
So I missed one part of that when you said After you talked about the new devices to consider zooming into the classroom, you mentioned that we're adding a staff to do, what was the position?
It's called a homebound educator.
Homebound
So when you think about, in the past, we've had students who are homebound for medical fragility, for example. So it gave us the idea and consideration of adding a position where that person acts as the liaison between the home and the classroom teacher when it isn't as easy to couple them live. So we're looking at adding one or more of those positions to help support our families as well, and to ensure, again, full access or access to the greatest extent possible to the classroom teacher and to the classroom materials.
So I do want to add that in terms of not adding position, the conversation, we have we've had that position that existed, and we haven't.
It's filling the position that we haven't filled.
Filling and redeploying, because it has been just used for homebound students, but now making that connection within, to really kind of help as a liaison within a COVID-19 quarantine scenario.
Yeah, I'm personally very excited about that. I think that's a great position, and I think that can help address some of the anxiety that's there. So if you need more than one, then please bring them back to the board.
Very good.
Okay, does anybody else have, Kate?
Thank you. I just wanted to briefly touch on if we approve the secondary option 1, which is staying virtual until the end of the first semester, and that's January 25th, I believe. But that date of January 25th is not really set in stone, I'm thinking, depending on what happens with COVID-19 in the community.
And so, great question. In terms of monitoring the data, that is always a target date. But even as we prepared for that target of November 9th, and now we're in a completely different place just because of what is happening in our local area. And so we would work to plan for second semester, but continue to monitor that data in consultation with Wayne County Health Department. If we were at a place where we were not deemed to be safe to return students in that environment, then that would be a conversation that we would have to have in terms of our next steps. So if you think about this reconfirmation meeting, every 30 days, we come back to you as a Board of Education to give an update. And if for the most part, we would hope that we're continuing to stay the course with our plans, but if anything happened in a health and safety space, then we would look to pivot or change, and you would reconfirm that delivery every month.
And so to the same end, if option 2 for the secondary was approved, then, there's dates like November 30th, December 7th, et cetera. Those also would be subject to change depending on the situation with COVID-19.
Absolutely. Anytime that we are in-person learning, any date would be subject to change based on what's happening with the pandemic and the spread within our community and schools.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm also wondering about, last night we talked about this, but I just want to make sure that it's clear to the community, our families, that when we're talking about bringing secondary students back into the classroom to face-to-face, if we did option 2, that there's not going to be an opportunity for Safe Start families to switch to the virtual academy until the semester break. Is that correct?
That is correct, and that is something that is definitely that was difficult for us, but we initially, as we opened up the virtual academy for elementary families, I know even at the virtual town hall, I shared that would be a goal to try to open that again for secondary families, but when we got to the logistics of it, we could not open up the virtual academy for secondary families, and so that would become so disruptive to their schedules, just not having that opportunity to do so. However, when we look at the second semester, that is a natural break where anybody would have that opportunity to then go into the virtual academy. If they know our target is to begin transitioning secondary students back for second semester, they would have that window to go into the virtual academy again at that time and have to have that semester commitment. Now, one thing I will say, in terms of that master schedule, it is a big task to complete. So we are already in a space that we will need to begin to ask families what are their plans for second semester. When we look at trimester for elementary, that next trimester begins on December 4th. So it is time, and I know that that will be frustrating for families because they'll say, how am I to make this decision? And I don't even know what that plan is. But for planning purposes, we really need to get out there early to say, what are your plans for second semester or for second trimester, so we know if we have to do additional staffing to manage that, and so that will be coming soon.
Thank you. I'm wondering, I know we don't have any outbreaks in our schools as, defined by the health department, but when we look at some of the COVID-19 cases that have been on the athletic teams, do those count as outbreaks?
And so that's a great question, and I don't want to continue to emphasize that we don't have outbreaks. I know that that feels like something to celebrate, but tomorrow that could be a different scenario. And so you're right in terms of how they're reported. So it's based on their source of where that took place, and is that something that happened at school? So oftentimes our young people may be congregating at gatherings outside of school, or parties or things along those lines. So when they do their contact tracing, they really have a good job of determining where or the source of. And so it could be students that are on a similar team, but their contact or connection happened maybe from a family member, or they were on an outside event. So it could be that at this point, it hasn't been classified at that fashion because the source of contact didn't happen at that school facility. But that could very well happen, like I said, is as much as tomorrow. So really, we don't focus as much on that outbreak. It could happen, but more about the rigorous mitigation strategies that we have in place to try to keep that from happening as soon as we find that those events are.
So we've had at least 2 teams that have had to quarantine.
Yes.
Because of COVID-19 amongst the members of the team.
Yeah.
Whether or not they got it from each other at the practice or a meet or whatever, but there were enough cases on the team that the whole team was quarantined.
Yes. So when you look, for example, at teams, so if our coaches are working to make sure that they're following the mitigation strategies, they're wearing their mask when they're there, the swim team, for example, they're wearing their mask anytime they're not in the pool. And then, let's say, for example, kids are driving together, or kids are ended up getting, coming together for a graduation party or things along those lines. So a lot of times kids that are on teams are also friends outside of school. So the health department may have identified that source of contact outside of school. But for us, because there's still that collective working together, we make that decision to say for 2 weeks, we're going to shut the team down because we don't want that to continue with rides and congregating together. And that's from communication with the health department as well.
Right, so thinking about those students who are quarantined, do we have any feedback on how their learning is being supported? This is sort of our little microcosm of what could potentially happen. So just wondering how they're being supported and how it's going for them, because
so all of our
important.
Secondary students that you're speaking about in the sports that have been impacted are still learning virtually, and so they have access to their curriculum and are still attending virtually.
But the ones that have tested positive are probably not necessarily attending if they're ill, right?
And so I wouldn't have the specifics over who is or isn't attending virtually, but if anytime they're making up assignments, teachers would work with them to make up those assignments. I have not heard of an issue at this point, and I think as Ms. Rail shared, as we look down the road, we're still working to develop multiple measures of support, but at this point, they're working probably directly with their teachers and may very well, anticipating, are still engaging in their remote learning.
And so that sort of segues into my next, I'm going to call it concern. I spoke about this last night, and I just want to remind you and administration that I am hoping for, and I think the rest of the board agrees, hopefully, that we would like some high-level information about how you're having interactions and how students who need that extra support, or though even just those who are feeling isolated, are being supported, and what kind of interactions and outreaches are occurring with them, because just today, I've heard about students that even though they're doing well in school, they're still feeling the mental stress of not just virtual school, but COVID-19 and being isolated.
I agree. I thought even more about that last evening, and just thinking, and we'll continue those discussions outside of just, I know my response last night is working with teachers, working with, your building support, but looking even with our external partnerships and other resources that we can provide for families. But I also just wanted to emphasize that, once again, this is collective. We have staff that is dealing with the same thing, that are going home in tears every night and are completely stressed beyond measure. And so, once again, as our looking at all of our resources and the best ways to provide support and resources for all during this struggling time. Those are conversations, and I do want to say conversations that keep many of us up at night. And so I think as we have conversations, I never want it to appear as if that's something that we don't have our eye on, or we're not concerned, or we don't have the health and safety and mental well-being of our kids at the forefront of everything that we do, because that is why we are here, and that's the work that we will continue to do.
Thank you for that. And I want to make sure that, we do have a feedback loop, because it is so important. And, we hear about things that sometimes families aren't comfortable bringing to teachers or to administration. And so, I sent an email to Patty, who she passed it along to you today, but, it's so important to make sure that we are following through on all of this, and to be able to have some kind of checks and balances on it, I think would be really important. I mean, I've heard about parents who have emailed teachers and haven't heard anything, and then they've emailed the principal and they've never received an email back. And so, it's really, really important that we are making sure that these interactions occur. So I feel so strongly about it.
I hear your passion, and I applaud you for continuing to bring that forward. And what I would say in that collective response, sometimes kids might not be comfortable going to their teacher, might not be comfortable. So if somebody is comfortable going to any of you, please bring it to us, because however that information gets to us, we need to be proactive in getting resources and supports out and working with students, and even having that ability, as I said, with this throughout the first semester, so being able to bring kids in small groups, not just for academics. It could be a student that's 4.0, but really struggling socially and emotionally, and having opportunities to bring those in. That's what we would work to develop with the teams. But for anybody who has a contact, if it's a neighbor, we have to, once again, the collective effort of our community to make sure that like we tell the kids, see something, say something. If somebody's contacted you and shared, please pass that information on, because we have to do that together.
I also wanted to make just a suggestion on our, we have that, what's it called? That page on the website that tells families who to contact, like start with the classroom teacher and then move.
How to address a concern?
Yes, that. Is it possible to have maybe something just on there about, like, if you don't receive an answer within a certain amount of time, and I'm thinking 48 hours possibly, that then move to the next person, and I don't know that that is on there, but I think sometimes people don't know how long to wait to get a response.
I think it's a good suggestion. I'll take a look. I don't know the sheet myself to know what specific numbers are on there, but we can take a look at that.
Okay, thank you. I am finished with my questions.
Okay. So, anybody else?
Madam President?
Yeah?
I'm sorry, as Member Kehoe and Member Berninski shared some things, 2 questions did trigger that I'd like to ask, if that's okay.
Go ahead.
So one is the printed packets for students. We've heard about students that are having a hard time reading all of the text that is on the online environment, and they've asked for printed packets so the students don't have to read hundreds of pages online. Are those opportunities available to students to get those materials printed and be picked up at the school? That's number 1.
Ms. Real? Is she over there?
The answer to that question is yes. So anytime a parent would need access to printed materials, they can request them from the teacher. They could reach out to the building principal. They can request those. We have also made printed packets of a number of materials that have been picked up by parents at the school site. We can also mail them to the homes if necessary as well. So there's a variety of ways we try to get printed materials to families who request and need those printed materials.
Great, thank you. And thank you for also mentioning the homebound educator that is being looked at. I think that's a great position to add. My second question is around the response time. Is there a district policy that is in place that says teachers and administrators need to respond to students within 24 to 48 hours? I ask that because, as Member Berninski mentioned, that there might be an opportunity to change them or add to the map that says these are the people to contact. And if you don't hear it within 24 or 48 hours, you go to the next level. We've heard from families where they've waited days and weeks. They've gone to the teacher, they've gone to the administrator. So I'm wondering if there's a policy or expectation from the administration.
So I don't think we actually have a policy that's in place, but I know that there are practices within the building in terms of what is a reasonable time period to try to get back with emails and phone calls, but I will get that specific information and share that with you in board notes.
And I'd like to reiterate too that if someone is reaching out to a teacher and not getting response back, and then they reach out to the building principal, their next person to reach out to are called the leveled leaders. So our director of high school education, Mr. Hal Hurd, who's in the room here, our executive director of middle school education, middle school data and school improvement, Mr. Anthony Ruella, and our director of elementary education, Ms. Maureen Malloy. And if they don't get a response from them, which I would find highly unlikely, their next reach out would be to me, Beth Rail, the chief academic officer. So if you're not getting a response from someone, please continue and let us know, because each of our levels sits above those levels. So I just want to reiterate that that's the process.
Did you have anything else?
Nope, those are my 2 questions. Thank you.
Okay. So if nobody has anything else, we are going to move on.
Oh, not quite.
Oh, sorry.
So just want to finish up a couple of slides. Next piece is the participation rate. So this is our interaction rate. I'm going to ask Mr. Tiskowitz to just join and just share our last 30 days worth of our participation rate from our students.
Thank you, Ms. Merritt. As you can see on the screen, we have been monitoring our interactions, our two-way interactions with our students using our attendance data. For the week of September 25th through the 30th, our percentage was 97.79. From October 1st through October 8th, it was 97.83%. From the period between October 9th and October 15th, it was 97.77%. And Through October 17th through the 22nd, it was 97.9%. And this is pretty consistent to our attendance that we've seen in previous years. It's right around 98.5%. When you look at the number of students, you're thinking about 17,000 students approximately. It's about 400 absences a day, which is pretty common.
So any questions about participation?
We'll start with Doug.
No, I'm so glad to hear those numbers.
Pardon?
I said, I'm really glad to hear about those numbers. Thank you for that update.
You're welcome.
Doug? Okay.
Okay.
Patrick?
So, I'm sorry, I just want to make sure I understand the two-way interaction rate. I know that this is something that's required by the extended continuity of learning plan. What does two-way interaction mean? Is it just attendance in the class that a teacher is at? Or how is that actually measured, and what is it measuring?
We are using their attendance in the classroom through the synchronous learning.
Okay, so it could be a teacher, or it could be a student that is marked as present in a class with 27 other kids. It's not necessarily that there was a one-on-one conversation with the teacher and that student.
Correct. There is communication with the teacher and the student during that class period, correct.
And there's actually in terms of how we're ranking is their daily attendance, in terms of, them checking in, but the two-way definition is it could be a phone call to a teacher, it could be an email to a teacher, and having that response back.
Could be an assignment that was turned in.
Yeah.
So it's really just making sure that that student is
connected to the classroom.
Connected to the classroom, doing the work, and it's measured on a weekly basis?
It is on a daily basis, which converts into a weekly number, and that's the period. We do it every day, and then we calculate the total week.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
John?
No.
Okay. I don't have anything. I think that is a very good interaction rates. I'd like to point out that I get, two-way interaction. My kids have been messaging me tonight. I'll get back to them later today. Anupam, do you have anything?
No, thank you.
Okay. Kate? Okay. So we will move on to the approved mitigation.
And just the final piece I wanted to share, and I think, a couple of meetings ago, we talked about the rubric that we had to submit to Wayne County Health Department, and I just wanted to make sure I brought that forward, because as they talk about in-person learning and continuing, it is with that approved mitigation plan. So if we didn't have that approved plan, then that would be a different discussion from the Wayne County Health Department. And as you know, they gave a rubric, and we had to fill in all of the things that we were doing in the various areas that are shared here. Our personal protective equipment, so that's the wearing of our face mask and all the things that come under those plans, and we have that K through 12 and all of our staff, our spacing and movement, our hand hygiene, the screening of staff and students, our busing and the protocols that we're using on our bus, food services, extracurricular activities, our testing protocols, cleaning, athletics, medically vulnerable students and staff, and responding to positive tests. And so we have filled in that rubric. We submitted that. Now, they don't actually give us our grade back, but the passing grade has to be at least 80 points. And as we shared, we believe that we are well over 90 with our mitigation factors that are in play, but they just do return that approved letter. So we did want to make sure that we connected that to this presentation so that parents are aware, and that is also on the website that we are operating under an approved plan. And so for that, in terms of the reconfirmation meeting, those are all of the areas. The next step, as a part of this meeting, we need to allow for public comments during our citizens' comments time. If parents wanted to share with us how are things going in terms of the instructional delivery model or any feedback that they would have for these, this would be their time to do so. This document, once the plan would be approved or this 30-day reconfirmation is approved, we post that to our transparency link. That's on our official P-CCS website, and we are also required to submit that to CEPI, and I think that's by Mr. Tiskowitz, is that by November 6th? I think we have to get it submitted to CEPI just to make sure that we're on the timeline. So our next reconfirmation meeting will be Tuesday, November the 24th. And so with that.
All right, so we are on to letter E, which is citizens' comments. I have not gotten any citizens' comments. I'm just wondering if there is anybody in the audience that would like to make a citizen comment and was unaware of the form. Just want to give everybody a chance.
So my first thing I want to say is I want to say thank you to the two board members that talked about students that were struggling. I was a little disappointed that more people didn't talk about that. So the second thing I want to say is kids need to be back in school now. You know, right now they need to be in school. How can you have a K through 6, get them in some sort of hybrid program and not, you know, the rest, the secondary kids? So those are my points. I'm going to say, my other thing I'm going to say is, have you guys talked to Northville, Brighton, and Novi? How can they do it and we can't? Are we less than them? Come on, you guys are better than that. Talk to them. Find out how they can run the high schools, and we can't. Thank you.
Do you need the form filled out, Nick? Okay, perfect. All right, thank you. All right, anybody else? Okay, so now we are on to F, which is action items, discussion. We have, first thing we have is action item 211024, consider approval of a resolution for secondary instructional delivery plan, first and final reading. So I am looking for a motion.
Madam President, I move that we consider approval of a resolution for secondary instruction delivery plan, first and final reading, action item 211024.
Thank you. I'm looking for a second.
I second it.
All right. It has been moved by Member Kehoe and seconded by Member Lazarowicz that we consider approval of a resolution for a secondary instructional delivery plan, first and final reading, action item 211024. And I will read the resolution so we are all aware of what it says. It was moved by Member Kehoe and seconded by Member Lazarowicz to approve the recommendation for Plymouth Canton Community Schools secondary students in grades 6 to 12 to continue receiving instruction in a fully virtual model through the end of the first semester, January 22nd, 2021. Opportunities for in-person support will be provided at the building level for students with academic and social emotional needs, including specialized classes throughout the remainder of the first semester. There's a line for ayes and nays. Resolution, they'll put the number in, on October 27th, 2020, during a regular meeting of the Plymouth Canton Board of Education, the undersigned duly qualified and acting president of the Board of Education of Plymouth Canton Community Schools, County of Wayne, State of Michigan, hereby certifies that the foregoing is a true and complete copy of a resolution adopted by the Board of Education at a regular meeting held on October 27th, 2020, the original of which resolution is a part of the board minutes, and further certifies that notice of the meeting was given to the public under the Open Meetings Act 1976 PA 267 as amended. All right, does anybody have any discussion on this? Mr. Keough?
Yeah, I think that what you just read said the undersigned duly qualified, but the signature line is Mr. Brooks, the secretary.
I emailed Diane about it. She'll fix it.
Okay, great, thank you.
All right, does anybody have any discussion on this? Mr. Brooks, can you take us through a roll call vote, please?
Sure. Okay, first member Berninski?
Yes.
Member Brooks, yes. Member Kehoe?
Yes.
Member Lazarowicz?
Yes.
Member McCoyne,
Yes.
Member Sadoo.
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0.
Our next item is action item 211025. Consider approval of resolution for reconfirmation of extended COVID-19 learning plan, first and final reading. I am looking for a motion. Madam President, I move that we consider approval of a resolution for reconfirmation of extended COVID-19 learning plan, first and final reading. It's action item 211025. Okay? And I need a second.
Second.
Okay. So it was moved by Member Borninski and seconded by Member Brooks that we consider approval of resolution for reconfirmation of extended COVID-19 learning plan, first and final reading, action item 211025. And this resolution, it was moved by Member Borninski and seconded by Member Brooks to reconfirm the Plymouth Canton Community Schools extended COVID-19 learning plan that was approved on September 29th, 2020. This plan recommends that students continue to receive instruction through two distinct models. One, the P-CCS Virtual Academy, a 100% virtual model, and Safe Start Remote Learning with P-CCS, a model that began 100% virtually with a planned phase-in approach to in-person learning. In Safe Start Remote Learning with P-CCS, all students in grades K to 5 will continue to receive in-person instruction through a half-day hybrid model. Students in grades 6 to 12 will continue to receive instruction remotely through the end of the first semester, January 22nd, 2021, with opportunities for additional in-person support for students with academic and social emotional needs, including specialized classes. This reconfirmation is a requirement of MCL 388.1698A of the State School Aid Act. And there's a line for ayes and nays. Resolution on October 27, 2020, during the regular meeting of the Plymouth Canton Board of Education. The undersigned duly qualified and acting president of the Board of Education of Plymouth Canton Community Schools, County of Wayne, State of Michigan, hereby certifies that the foregoing is a true and complete copy of a resolution adopted by the Board of Education at a regular meeting held on October 27, 2020, the original of which resolution is a part of the board's minutes, and further clarifies that notice of the meeting was given to the public under the Open Meetings Act 1976, PA 267, as amended. Is there any discussion on this? Okay, Mr. Brooks, can you lead us through a roll call vote, please?
Sure. First, Member Brzezinski.
Yes.
Member Brooks, yes. Member Kehoe.
Yes.
Member Lazarowitz.
Yes.
Member McCoyne.
Yes.
Member Sadoo.
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0.
Okay, so now we are on to G, which is follow-up board questions, which I am getting back to. Here we go. So at our last meeting, the follow-up board questions, the board would like to know the drop rate for high school students taking classes through Michigan Virtual, and if there's any thought to creating our own content. That was the only one that we had.
I believe that we entered the drop rate in board notes. Was that sufficient?
I believe that was a Newcomb's question.
Yes, I saw that. Thank you.
Okay. And then we had some questions outstanding for this evening related to the plan.
We also had one question outstanding from last evening concerning the number of, like, interventionists, social
Yes.
workers, nurses. But, maybe Diane, do you want to make sure that we're capturing all the questions that you have from this evening as well?
So it's interventionists, social workers.
I think that was Vice President to do.
Yeah.
So was it just the interventionists and social workers?
School
And
psychologists.
school psychologists and school nurses.
Okay.
Looking for the positions that we were able to support
Yes.
through our enhancement and knowledge, is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Could we add the information on the, I always forget the name of it, the form on the website that tells you who to contact when?
Yes, as a question, follow-up question.
Yeah, how to address a concern.
How do I address it?
How to
I'm
address
gonna
the
write that down.
concern, website, follow-up, how to address a concern. They were looking for information. Do we have standard policy in terms of how long to respond? I know we don't have a policy, but practice.
And then
Yeah,
also the
procedure.
feedback. I don't know if I should really call it feedback, data on, outreach to students who need support.
Yeah, if you can speak up a little bit, I can't hear you.
I'm sorry, the data on outreaches to students who need support.
So we can follow up in terms of some planning on increasing those opportunities.
Yeah, increase. Just waiting for, she's very fast. All right, is there anything else that we need to capture for our next meeting? All right, is there anything else anybody needs?
So I do have a question in terms of our next meeting.
Okay.
I want to thank everybody for our first kind of a hybrid approach to being back to a meeting, but still allowing for any board member that can't be here to weigh in virtually. I think that was very helpful. Do we want to keep this same space for our next meeting, or are we interested in moving back to the board office? What are your thoughts about that?
I like this.
Like here?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that this provides
This
the
is great.
physical distancing space, although we didn't have a lot of attendance here. Even with just the new teachers, we would have had too many people in the board office that was there. So I think we need to have a larger space.
I agree with the number of staff. And we could have more people that wanted to come. And then we would have been really tight.
I like this because I think it's more centrally located in the district.
More centrally located for you.
I could walk here.
Some of us can walk to the board office.
Yes.
Some of us do walk to the board office.
Some of
So,
us
yeah.
have a 20-minute drive to the board office.
Yeah.
This will be a nice compromise.
All right, so if that is it, then we will have come to the end of our meeting, and we are adjourned. It is 9:24. Thank you so much.